you to the two lovely profs here for the invitation. I see my Rose colleagues. I love you, I miss you. Okay, so let me not waste time. So this afternoon I'm going to be talking to you about generative artificial intelligence and what it means for postgraduate education specifically. And I've titled my presentation From Despair to Hope. And the reason why I've titled it that is because I'm going to start from a very dark place and then hopefully we'll end up in the light. That's why it's titled From Despair to Hope. Okay, towards the end of last year, I had a student who completed his master's. At the point in time when I said to him, okay, I think your master's is ready to go into the examiners now. He says to me, thank goodness, because my brain is broken and I actually don't think I have any more capacity to analyze anything or write another word. So I was actually hoping this meeting you'd be telling me it's done because I have nothing left in me. So we had a conversation around what it actually means to do a master's. And I was just teasing him and saying, no, if the brain isn't broken yet, then you haven't done a master's. And I think a lot of times our students don't quite understand what it is that we actually expect from them when they come in. And as you're pushing them beyond their boundaries, it's something that is difficult for them, but it's a growing space as we are breaking their brains. Okay, so I'm going to start off with a question and I'll just ask you to think about it. It's something we have been talking about since we started earlier on today. What is the purpose actually of postgraduate education? I'm going to ask you this question again towards the end. And I want you to think about it in the context of artificial intelligence tools. Do you think they are potentially supportive or disruptive of the attainment of this purpose? Okay, so what is the purpose of postgraduate education in the South African context? I was watching the EQPE video, I think last night, where some of you sitting here in this room were defining what a postgraduate education actually is. And it would be interesting to see by the end of this session whether you still think about it in those same terms. Okay. So the purpose of postgraduate education, my slides are just doing weird things. Sorry about that. When we are thinking about it, a lot of times we have to align, of course, with national imperatives for each qualification. SAQA has told us that for level 8, for level 9, for level 10, this is what we expect. So when we are coming up with our own descriptions, or even when we're coming up with examiner guidelines, we're going to think about those national imperatives. We're going to look at the institutional vision, mission, and values. We're going to look at the disciplinary requirements, the needs within the context, the needs of the community, but also funding body requirements are going to guide what we say are actually the purposes of the postgraduate qualifications that we offer. Unfortunately, the purposes that we think sometimes and quite often actually contradict the reason why students are there to do their postgraduate degrees. Okay, the motivation, the reason why they are there. A lot of our students have come in to do the degree not because they want to make an original contribution. It's for something else. It's for other reasons. And I'm going to talk a little bit about those reasons because they're really important to think about when we are framing where generative artificial intelligence fits into this picture. Okay, so the postgraduate student, by the time they're done, they have specific knowledge, specific skills, attitudes, and behaviors, or particular outputs or products, usually in the form of a thesis. So when we're talking about knowledge, we're talking about kind of the broad knowledge, and then the deep knowledge, the expert knowledge, and so on. And what that means is that a postgraduate student has got a particular identity, and that's what we are trying to develop in our masters and our PhD students. We want them to develop into different kind of people who think differently about the world, who see the world differently, who critique the world, you know. But when postgraduate students are coming in, that's not necessarily what they're thinking about. Research tells us that they come into their postgraduate studies with academic motivations, okay? They may have performed really well at undergraduate level, and then they're encouraged to go on with their master's or their PhD. They may look at the perceived quality of the postgraduate program, and that's what actually motivates them to do that program. And then they may look at the research expertise. So they are looking at, those are the academic motivations around doing a postgraduate degree. As you can see, none of this has anything to do with learning how to do independent research or making a contribution to knowledge. Their personal motivations, research has consistently shown that if parents have a high educational level, then it's most likely that the children will pursue postgraduate studies as well. Doesn't mean they're the only ones, of course. And then family income will also determine it. There are some who are able to carry on with their studies, but some have to drop out after their first degrees because they have to support the family. How much they actually earn when they are working. If they have a higher salary, they're more likely to go back into postgraduate studies. Cultural curiosity was an interesting one for me. Students who come in from a different country because they are interested in a university in a particular culture to try and learn about a different way of life, and that's their motivation for actually doing their postgraduate studies. And then, of course, availability of funding is a huge one. Okay, and then labor market motivations are big, and I think this is particularly true in the South African context where quite a large proportion of our students are part-time. Our postgraduate students come in part-time. Some will do their postgraduate studies because they have low job prospects, and they may be coming in from a country where there's social and economic instability. Leadership aspirations because they want to get a promotion. That's the reason why they're doing their postgraduate studies. They want to move out of their current careers and they think postgraduate studies will get them there. They feel I'll get a higher salary even if I stay in my same job. If I have a postgraduate, I just need those letters after my name. And then some will do their postgraduate studies because they want to learn particular skills or have a deeper knowledge or understanding of something. And some just to start a business, basically. So all of this is from research. Okay. So if we look at the motivations why students do their postgraduate studies, and you're looking at what we think is the purpose of postgraduate studies or postgraduate education, do we see that there's a little bit of a misalignment there? The reason why our students are coming in and the reason why we are actually providing them with this education, okay? So research supervision, while indispensable and valuable, cannot provide the sum of all support that a student needs in order to succeed in their postgraduate studies. So traditional supervision models are going to make it even worse, and I think, Kwezi, you spoke quite a bit about that and the importance of cohort supervision. So students come in and they have their motivations and they are doing their postgraduate studies and they realize I actually do not have the knowledge and the skills that I need to complete this. And a lot of times that's when they turn to other sources or other spaces. They may not be aware of what is within the institution, but then now there is ChatGPT, which I don't really like very much, but anyway. Now there's ChatGPT and a whole lot of other tools, some of them designed specifically for research and various research activities. And they come to know them and they start using them. And unfortunately, the way students are using them, the way a lot of our students are using them, from my conversations with my own postgraduate students, it's very uncritical. They are not aware actually of some of the dangers of using those tools. And those are some of the things that I'm going to talk about with you now. Okay, so artificial intelligence has been around. I'm not going to give you the full history, but it has been around and since about the 1950s, so for quite a long time now. over 70 years. I think that term was actually coined in the 1950s. So it's been a field of research, and it's actually contributed quite a lot to our lives. Things like Siri on your phone and so on, all of that is artificial intelligence. Your Google Maps, we use it quite a lot to do a lot of great things, to just make our lives easier. But unfortunately, it also has major failures. When it fails big time. Okay, so in July of 2024, if you have a Windows machine, you may have experienced this when your computer stopped working for maybe about 3 hours. And guess what? You have artificial intelligence to blame for that. So this actually resulted in flight delays in the United States. We had athletes who were going to the Paris Olympics who were delayed, some of them by a couple of days. They couldn't go because all the flights were now full. They were trying to rebook everybody. And apparently, they deny this, but apparently a back source at the back of the internet told me that CrowdStrike is the company that actually caused the problem. They're a cybersecurity company, and they are installed within the Microsoft Windows software. So during their update, one of their developers had picked the code from a generative AI tool, just a small part of it. And unfortunately, because he thought this is very basic code, shouldn't be a problem, didn't check it carefully, and it almost shut the world down, basically, for about 3 hours, which is quite interesting. Okay, a few years ago, IBM partnered with a university, a particular professor of oncology, and they were building an AI tool called Watson. They invested $62 million into this, and it turned out it was giving wrong recommendations when they started using it. And some of the recommendations could have been fatal to the patients, actually, because they hadn't given it enough training data for it to make sound recommendations. So they had to tank it. After investing 62 million, it just ended. It couldn't go ahead anymore. That was it, 62 million down the drain. And of course, there's been a lot of talk about bias within artificial intelligence tools. The fact that the facial recognition tools, you know, that is also artificial intelligence, don't work well on Black people. And they were using these facial recognition tools to actually try and catch criminals, identify and catch criminals. And in some instances, they would have members of parliament identified as criminals just because they were Black. And that's because of who developed the tools and that kind of thing. It's a whole long story. And then, of course, we have unfortunately also had suicides that are linked to artificial intelligence. This is from last year, October 2024. There was another one a couple of years ago. This is just a teenager who was chatting with a tool called conversational.ai, and he became more and more withdrawn. He had mental health issues. And then after he passed away, his mom discovered the kinds of conversations he was having with the tool. It was actually encouraging him to commit suicide. So she's currently suing the company for this. Okay. So anyway, my actual concerns about generative artificial intelligence, particularly for postgraduate education, fall into these 3 categories. There are many, but I'll just mention these 3. The fact that everyone is screaming about how amazing generative AI is, but it's amazing for what exactly? What exactly is it that it's helping us to accomplish in postgraduate education? It's actually more political than technological, as I'm sure we are seeing in our world today. And then it has some unexpected gains, but also some unexpected huge learning losses, which I will elaborate on just now. Just see my time? Okay, I think I'm fine. The answer is, you guessed it, artificial intelligence. But what exactly is the question? So it's become a buzzword. I mean, if I was Googling yesterday, I Googled artificial intelligence, South Africa government. Oh my goodness, the number of times that it's mentioned. And then you read it and you're thinking, what do they even mean? I don't understand what they even mean. I don't know if they understand what they mean. It's like if we just put in the word artificial intelligence somewhere and talk about all the amazing things happening in the country around artificial intelligence, then it means we've got it made. But a lot of times people are mentioning that phrase, a lot of times people in management, even in our universities, but they actually aren't quite clear about what they mean. Do they mean specific tool? Do they mean that generative functionality? Artificial intelligence is a whole field with machine learning and deep learning and all of the and neural networks. So are they talking about that? They actually don't know what they mean, so we don't know what they mean. Okay. Actually, research tells us that up to 85% of artificial intelligence models fail. Okay. There's a research that was done by some colleagues where they show that artificial intelligence models are very bad at citing news articles. So they are so bad, and what makes it worse is the fact that they are confident in their responses. And the paid versions of these artificial intelligence tools are even more confident in their wrongness, which was quite interesting. Okay, and then there's the issue of data contamination. Okay, and what we mean here is that, generative artificial intelligence works around reasoning based on patterns in the data that it has learned. That's how it's supposed to work, right? But if I've trained it on this medical exam, right? Let's say this entrance into medical school, which is what made people freak out so much in the States when it came out. MBA entrance exams and medical school entrance exams, it would pass them almost with 100%. But if I've given it this exact exam and I've trained it on this exam, and then it gets 100% on the exam, doesn't mean it's a good tool, right? Because it's supposed to be able to figure out what the question is and try and find the answer based on patterns in the words. But if I've used the actual thing that I'm asking it to train it, then it's defeating the whole purpose. That means it's actually a really bad tool. If I change the question slightly, it's going to get that question wrong. Okay. Still under the answer is, most generative AI tools are actually still unable to explain to you how they got to their answer. So how do students learn from it if they can't even ask, so how did you get from here to here? I can't follow the reasoning, and it also can't explain that to the student. And then it's data-driven. Long-tail work is work that is in like niche areas. Okay, so if you're in a niche area where you're doing research, you'll find you actually are not going to get the kind of responses that will be helpful to you. Those who are in more broader areas may be able to, okay? And then this one was interesting. It's a research where they were looking at training an AI tool using data from the tool itself, okay? So in other words, they took a Wikipedia page, right? And then they trained it based on that Wikipedia page. It was around, I think I wrote it somewhere. Finally go to my notes. Did I write it? No, I didn't write it, shame. Okay, anyway, so it's around, they trained it based on that Wikipedia page. And then the output, when they asked it questions, the output, they used that output to train the next model and used the output from that next model to train the next one. So in other words, they're using synthetic data, not real data from humans. By the time they got to the ninth iteration, it was just gibberish. So they actually show in their paper how it has changed from talking about, I think they were talking about something from the medieval period. I can't remember what it was, Roman buildings or something like that. By the time they get to the ninth iteration, it's talking about some animals, some rabbits or something like that. That's the response that it's giving, okay? Because then it picks up what it thinks is the right thing. And this is one huge thing that worries me about the things that are happening in the States at the moment. Because if you're going to take out people and put in AI tools, you actually need people for the AI tools to work well. You need the data that they provide, the data that they give you. Once the AI tool has its own data, that data can't be used to train another AI tool because then it loses its quality. I hope you understand the point that I'm making. And then we now have Grammarly's authorship product. I don't know if you've heard about it. And Turnitin just released Clarity, I think a week or two ago. These two products encourage students to write on the product. Okay, so I go and I open Turnitin's Clarity, and that's where I write my essay. And then it gives me guidance in terms of, it actually has got a little bit of AI capabilities and gives me guidance around that. So Turnitin has moved from their claims of, oh no, we can catch students when they use AI, which by the way, they actually can't. And they now want to follow the process. Can you imagine, like, that is so bad. Because now we are teaching it how we write. That's what it's actually doing, so that it can mimic the way that we write. I mean, think of the way that you write a journal article, for example. For me to finish my introduction, I'll have gone through, I don't know, I'll have deleted the paragraph 7 times, and then I move something to the other end and think, no, that should be in the conclusion, and then I come back. It's such a messy process. So now if it says I must write there, then it's learning from my keystrokes how I actually write, that writing process. And they're going to use that and monetize it later on. Okay. Are we dark enough? Yes? I told you we're going into despair. Okay. All right. So as we know, the USA are the leaders. So it's more political than technological. That's my second point. USA are the leaders because they were the first ones to actually develop a really strong LLM, which is what your generative AI is based on. Their power is actually in a product called NVIDIA, which is the chip that they use. I'm not going to talk about these other things there on the slide, because the real war is around NVIDIA. It's become what they call an AI arms race. Whoever wins it is the world leader, basically. And what they've done, they refuse to sell their NVIDIA, their latest NVIDIA chips, to China, because China is also making huge progress around this. And what China has done is they are using less power, less powerful chips, but building products that are just as good. Okay, and of course, I'm sure we all heard about the DeepSeek that came out about a month ago and had everyone screaming and pulling their hair out. Europe is contributing quite a bit around AI legislation. They are coming up with very interesting guidelines around the use of AI, which are being taken up by other countries. But the point I'm making here is that it's a political game. That's what it has actually become. It's less about the technology and more about the politics. And if we don't recognize that, then I don't know. So how government data would give an AI company extraordinary power. This is from the conversation written by the person up there. It's from the 6th of March, just this past week. And in that article, she's talking about how all other AI companies want that data, because that's real data. The data I post online is the life I wish I had. But the data that the government has is the life I actually have, you know, and the power that it gives them. But anyway, and then this other article is talking about how teachers are actually not part of the decision-making process in building these tools, yet they understand the learning process better and could contribute better. But it's the people who are going to make money out of it. So it's about politics and money. That's all that it's about, unfortunately. And of course, it will only answer questions that it wants to answer. ChatGPT, a friend a colleague of mine in the States posted this on Chat 4 point whatever. I want to send a message to my national representative about our need to defend the sciences from the work of Trump, Musk, and the response was, I'm sorry, but I can't help with that request. What does that mean? That one is DeepSeek, the Chinese one. So it asks what happened on June 4, 1989 in China. If you Google it, what's the name? Yes, so it was a huge massacre that took place, which is never mentioned in China. It's not there in the news, it's not there in the history books, you don't find it anyway. So if you ask DeepSeek will tell you, I'm sorry, I cannot answer that question. I'm an AI assistant designed to provide helpful and harmless responses. But if you ask about September 11, it will tell you. Isn't that interesting? But can you see my point when I'm saying it's a political game? It's such a political game. And I don't think our students realize that. And the fact that all the data that they enter there is going to be monetized by these companies, and that's how they get better and better. I'm not saying they shouldn't. I actually think they do have value, but it's important that when we use them, we are critical about the way that we use them. And then, of course, my last point is the unexpected learning gains or losses. This article speaks about how students were given ChatGPT, or not ChatGPT, but a GPT tool that was developed, GPT Tutor in mathematics. They did really well. When it was taken away and they were given an assessment, they did very badly, which was quite interesting. This one talks about some of the psychosocial impacts of generative AI, the fact that people who look a certain way, like your red Indians, your black people, and so on, are painted in particular ways within those tools. Okay, so I think they asked a simple question like, tell me a story about a girl going to school. And it would always be a white girl, for example, that kind of thing. In every single time they tried a number of different tools. And then, of course, some people are unfortunately using it to fabricate research that does not exist, that is not there. But what these guys did is they came up with a false result. I think it's in medicine, some surgical procedure which everyone knows is wrong. And then they asked ChatGPT to come up with the data to support that particular result. And ChatGPT did that. But when an expert looks at that data, they can pick out the problems with the data. But people are publishing, and unfortunately, a lot of papers are actually, I think I was reading somewhere that in 2024, it's about 10,000 papers retracted, and a lot of them, it has to do with things like data and the use of ChatGPT, which is heartbreaking. Then there's something called a jagged frontier, where you'd expect, if AI knows how to answer this question, it should answer a similar question, but it doesn't work like that. Okay, and unfortunately, students may not always be aware of that. Okay, looks like I have more. Right, it enables research misconduct. I've already mentioned the fabricating of non-existent data. And then there's something called AI text humanizers. Anyone use Quillbot here? That's a text humanizer. So you take your text. So what students will do, they'll get the text from ChatGPT and then put it on Quillbot, and then it will humanize that text even more and kind of change it. But unfortunately, the use of those text humanizers has got some interesting results. This guy in his paper looks for things that he has called tortured phrases, because it will change words, but now it's changing words that actually mean something, you know? So it changes the word like big data to colossal information. So it means nothing to anyone in the field of big data, absolutely nothing. Artificial intelligence is changed to counterfeit consciousness. And so on, cloud computing, Hayes figuring random value, irregular esteem. But anyway, so he's got a whole list in his paper. He lists all of them, and he looks for them in papers, and he identifies papers that have actually used AI text humanizers that way. because it's just a weird word that no one would ever use, and no one knows what that phrase actually means. Okay, this will be, okay, so at the Alan Turing Institute, if you don't know who Alan Turing is, he's probably one of the fathers of artificial intelligence from the 1950s. So in London, there's the Alan Turing Institute, and they're actually developing an AI tool. They expect it will be done by the year 2050, which will win a Nobel Prize. So what they want the tool to actually come up with its own research and carry out the research and produce the results and write it up. And they expect by 2050, they should be able to produce a tool that will win. So they have a whole website for it. It's like dedicated just to this tool and what they are doing there. Okay. Anyway, I'll move you from despair to hope, I promise. One must first countenance despair in order to earn the right to hope. You can't hope without despair. Despair can help us to hope and ultimately act well. Okay. So as we're developing our students' identities and at postgraduate level, there are some things that are important for us to think about. Coming out of the darkness into the light or into hope. One of the things that I'm finding quite helpful, I actually encountered this a couple of weeks ago, a week or so ago, but I found it really helpful from Mishra. Those who know the TPAC model, that's the guy. So he's come up with this AI knowledge expertise framework, where on the bottom left, he calls it the novice's dilemma. So these are students who do not have AI expertise and they do not have disciplinary knowledge, okay? So they are labeled, so they can't evaluate the AI's outputs for accuracy. They don't know when AI will actually lead them astray because they don't even understand what is within the discipline. And then you've got the expert's advantage in the bottom, right, on the bottom right-hand side. The expert's advantage are those who have got expertise, like you and me, but may not have AI literacy, may not be AI literate. You're actually in a better position than the novice and the false confidence trap, because it's easier to learn how to use AI than to build disciplinary expertise. Okay, so you can actually start supporting your students even before you have full AI literacy. I can put it that way. The false confidence trap, high knowledge of artificial intelligence, no knowledge of the discipline. So they are confident in what they are doing, but they don't know that AI is actually lying to them. They are unable to evaluate that. And then, of course, we are all hoping to reach the dual expertise challenge. Apparently, if you are in that furthest quadrant, the top right-hand quadrant, when you use artificial intelligence, you are the most engaged, more than any of the other quadrants, because you spend a lot of time thinking not just about what tool you are using, but what it's giving you. And then you use prompts in order to get even better and better and better responses until you get to the point where you want to go. All right, so students are caught in a chicken-egg dilemma, expertise versus AI literacy. So which one comes first? Which one should we support first? They need to learn to craft their prompts. So do we actually. So when there's actually a skill set for crafting the prompts, tell the prompt who it is, tell the prompt who you are, tell the bot what you want it to do, how do you want it to do it? So what example exactly should it follow? What should be the output? And then from there, you can start to actually then further prompt it and ask it additional questions. But if you start with, give me a poem about South Africa, it's going to give you something very general, very broad, that doesn't really help you. Okay, so you need to be, all right? And then you must expect errors and evaluate all the output carefully, and then try to work with more than one tool, all right? I am just about done. Oh, what's the time? What's my time? Okay. So what then can you use Gen AI ethically for? Generating ideas, helping with initial writing, literature reviews. I have to say here that it doesn't do the literature review for you, right? But it can help you to see what you might have missed in your literature review. It's important for our students to understand that, okay? So they'll pick up Research Rabbit or whatever it is, or get summaries from Chat PDF or whatever other tool. And then they think, okay, this is it. But there's so much more engagement that needs to go into it. And the tool can just support, but they still need to go through the process. They still need to read those articles, not just the summaries that are coming out of the tool. And then it can help with data collection, transcription, and data analysis. And even then, human oversight is very important. Tools like InVivo and Atlas TI, even SPSS now have got AI add-ons. I have tested them and they are absolutely useless. And it's important for students to understand that. You still need to learn how to analyze the data, and then you can use the tool to try and see, what did I leave anything out? What could I have added more here? Oh no, I didn't think about that. Oh, okay, that's interesting, you know. But not as the basis for that, okay, now I'm just gonna run it. Oh no, now I have my analysis. No, okay. Okay, some questions for you. Finally, last slide. Phew. Okay. Recognize the centrality. We need to recognize that reading and writing are so central to the postgraduate education experience, to our students. And that's what your generative AI tools are supposed to give support with. They don't do it effectively, and our students need to understand that. And I worry that the way we support or don't support their reading and writing is actually pushing them to use these tools more. Okay, and then I have two questions there for you around other systemic issues that could be responsible for the misuse or over-reliance on generative AI tools, and should we be rethinking the purpose of postgraduate education? Really? Because at the moment, as I said at the beginning, there's a misalignment between their motivations and our purposes. So the purpose of postgrad education, as we have stated it in our documents, whose interests it actually serve? Thank you.